Hello, friends. In the vast world of podcasting, there's been something missing for a long time. A huge hole in this space, if you will. Ground that's never been tread. I'm talking, of course, about four men sitting around talking about movies into microphones. Welcome to CineSkeptics. I'll level with you. This is essentially another movie pod, but our main goal here is to take a more critical eye at popular cinema and the industry as a whole. When the ethos these days is everyone believing in letting people enjoy things, we also believe in letting people not enjoy things. And our main goal here is to just kind of shoot the shit, talk about movies, talk about where we think the industry can be improved and all that good stuff. Just to warn y'all, there will be some foul language in this podcast, so if you're averse to that sort of thing, please proceed with caution. Otherwise, my name is James Preston Poole,
I am Mark Scozen, also known as Mank.
I am Jacob Malchetti.
I'm Mark 10, aka Not Mank.
and we're going to start off today's pilot episode by first giving y'all a sense of our taste. We're going to kick things off on a positive note and talk about a movie recently for each of us that has, kind of reaffirmed what we'd like to see in the movies. So I'm actually going to go ahead and have Mark Tan go first.
All right, there are a lot of movies that I've seen so far this year that are real good, but I think there's only really one that made me think, wow, we need more movies like this. This is a good representation of what I'd like to see more in the movie theaters. And that movie is Jackass Forever.
Well done.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it stems from just my own theater experience because that was one where I didn't see it on opening day. It was during a Sunday afternoon, and yet the audience was ballistic at basically every scene in that movie. Like any Jackass movie, it's just a bunch of guys just doing stupid things and having a ball and enjoying each other's company. And the audience certainly was among those people that were right along with them. If you look at the opening scene all the way to the end, like it was just laughs all the time. It's been a while since like I've seen a comedy where it's really gotten reactions from people. And of course, it would be the movie where it's basically just genitalia 24/7. And which that's another thing that more movies should have because
Absolutely. Yeah.
it should just be body positivity.
Mm-hmm.
But
Dick
outside
and
of just the
balls.
silly stuff, it's just the kind of legacy follow up that we get these days, but there's a lot more heart and soul put into them. You see all the older cast members with the newer cast members, and there's no strife against each other. It's very much playful, fun. There's not much to say on an intellectual level, but sometimes that's really what you want from the movies as an escape. And Jackass Forever, to me, was probably my favorite escape of the year.
I laughed so hard during that movie at the Silence of the Lambs bit.
That's a great bit.
Oh, it's so funny that there was no sound coming out of my mouth. Like it was just silent. I was laughing that hard. So, Mark, I totally agree with you. We need, as a culture, more of Chris Pontius doing full frontal male nudity.
Yes.
All right. So, from one Mark to another, Mank, would you like to take it away?
For my movie, I think I'm going to go with Nope, which might not be my number one of the year, but I think it's the movie that I admire the most because it represents many of the things that I love about going to the movies, the theater experience, just, filmmaking in general. A lot of which I think we'll likely talk about later in relation to, I think, what might be missing from a lot of modern blockbusters, specifically our favorite MCU and Disney overlords. But, I think after Us, there was this question of, is Jordan Peele the real deal, or was Get Out, maybe a fluke or kind of just this major hit that he could not, duplicate. And I haven't rewatched since I first saw. I remember liking it quite a bit, maybe more than I think a lot of people did. But Nope, I really think proves to me that he is very much this unique generational talent who's having exactly the kind of career that is becoming increasingly more rare, if not, almost non-existent outside of kind of like the staples of Hollywood, like the Nolans, the Finchers, the PTAs, the Spielbergs. I mean, the dude has made three highly successful original films, each one increasingly bigger in not just scope, but the ideas that he's interested in, which in Nope aren't as explicitly clear as they might have been in, Get Out or Us, or at least they're not as kind of overt in their commentary. Like, you get that line from Keith David about not being able to tame animals, but there's so many other layers and themes of fame and nature and exploitation and the manipulation of media. And of course, it's like it is also a movie about movie making, which, like another movie I love this year was Crimes of the Future, which you can definitely like pull through those layers of this is about making art and the way that that can kind of either, corrupt you or kind of be a salvation for yourself. And Peele just genuinely loves movies. You can tell that from like this deep well that he's pulling from, which like whether it's Kubrick with like the almost like Shining inspired UFO raining blood scene, which is I think just like one of the most iconic images of like recent films that I've seen. He also loves Carpenter, obviously, like so there's a lot of that in there, but it's a movie where it's very effective and cool on its own, but if you take the time to peel back those layers and go, beneath the surface level action and play between the characters, there's so much more that are just like truly rewarding upon rewatch, or the more you think about it. So yeah, I mean, it's his most ambitious film, I think, and I understand why there's been some polarization in terms of the response to it, but I think this is the kind of movie that I love, where the more you think about it, the more you sit with it, it just continues to kind of really grow in your mind.
Mank, I could listen to you talk about Nope forever. That was great.
I've been waiting for this. There's so many ideas that I've had about it, and it's been one of the most rewarding movies I've seen all year for sure.
3 words to respond to that with: Kira motorcycle slide.
Yeah, that was hot.
That fucking ripped.
That is the main point now. As we need more male nudity, we also need more Akira motorcycle power slides.
Combine them together, you got yourself a picture.
Yes, sir.
I think it speaks to just how much Jordan Peele is becoming one of our great directors of this generation. The fact that he can sell a movie on his name alone.
Yeah.
He's at that like Christopher Nolan level. Not to compare them, because Jordan Peele is a great director in his own right. Those two, PTA, Tarantino, just going through the whole list of the quote-unquote film bro directors, they can all sell a movie on their own name, and I think that's something really special, and it makes me really happy to see people come out to just check out what the new Jordan Peele thing is all about. Now, the movie this year that I think really shockingly made me fall in love with cinema again, all over again, was Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Now, the movie's kind of a total mess. It's set from the perspective of the man who financially abused Elvis, which is Tom Hanks in a fat suit doing a funny voice. We jump through time periods with reckless abandon. They mash up Elvis's music with modern artists, sometimes not even with modern artists. Sometimes they'll throw in like a Britney Spears track from like 2004. But none of that really matters because Luhrmann captures the larger-than-life nature of this man, this icon, while also kind of slipping in messages about how he feels about capitalism, the corruption of the American dream, the corruption of celebrity along with the rise of celebrity, all the while Austin Butler gives this performance that is nothing less than pure possession by the king himself. It's not a perfect movie, but what it is just swinging for the fences so hard and doing so much and maximizing what you can do through the film medium that I have no choice but to love it completely. And I hope that in a few years it'll be looked at as a prime example of maximalism. Plus, You also get to see Tom Hanks in a fat suit running around going, "When will he sing Santa Claus?" for like 30 minutes straight, and that's worth the ticket price alone.
Amazing. I sadly still have not seen it, but The one thing I will comment on when you mentioned that it's not perfect, but I think a common theme that will come up between a lot of what we're talking about today is that perfection is really not what we're all interested in. Like there's a messy quality to a lot of this stuff that
Mhm.
makes them far more interesting and fun to watch. And, taking that bigger swing is always more fun to watch than just like an easy walk on first base. But I
Absolutely.
definitely want to hear what Jacob and Mark have to say because I know they both had interesting thoughts about the movie.
I kind of had a theory that I think like Baz Luhrmann on set was just like yelling the entire time with incomprehensible words coming out of his mouth. And everyone just kind of understood what he was saying because that movie is such a fucking trip. I wasn't a big fan with the direction they took with it. I wasn't really super crazy about Tom Hanks. In fact, it got to a point where when the movie was about to end and he was still going, I was like, Jesus, fuck, shut the hell up. But Austin Butler, he fucking ruled the screen. That it was pretty goddamn powerful, I will say. This isn't really apples to apples, but I'm gonna make this comparison anyway. I would go as far to say he kind of has that little commandeering like presence on screen that kind of takes your eyes out of your sockets that like Joaquin Phoenix did in like Joker.
Absolutely. And Joker is a whole other conversation, but I think that's a great comparison. Just big acting, but in a way that's not corny. It's just unignorable. He's doing something different that you haven't really seen before.
You guys have convinced me that he's going to be amazing in Dune. I was a little not happy about his casting. Not that I was
I
unhappy, but I was like, okay, well, I definitely bought too much into the stock of like every other weird looking lanky white guy actor, like the Barry Keoghan's and the Robert Pattinsons. I'm definitely sold now.
fuck, I forgot he's gonna be in Dune. I cannot
Yeah.
wait to see him in Dune.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be an excellent Fade Ralpha. I have no doubt.
Dune 2 is gonna fucking ruin my life in all the best ways.
Yeah, I feel like Austin Butler, at least for me, he made a big impression in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and just with every other role he's been getting, it's just been getting better and better. Yeah, he's definitely going to kill it in Dune, and just with Elvis in particular, the movie, it's just amazing to see a rise and fall biopic that's as excessive as the story it's telling, because we've been getting so many biopics over the years where it's almost like a playbook, but it's done it and visualized in such a boring way that it feels like the movie, like some of those movies are wasting their time. I mean, I'm sure this movie's been getting needled over and over again the last couple of years, but Bohemian Rhapsody is the example of how not to make a movie like this, whereas Elvis is, I'd say it is one of the best ways to make a movie like this.
Yeah,
Bohemian Rhapsody is like one of the worst goddamn movies I've ever seen. And Elvis, even though I wasn't a big fan of it, it is nowhere close to how fucking awful Bohemian Rhapsody is. And I feel that whoever at the Academy was like, oh, we're going to give a best editing Oscar to this mishmash of shit, they need to get a fucking swift kick in the gooch or some shit.
it really is a testament to how much people love Freddie Mercury, that movie made so much money, that the general audiences loved it, and it won Oscars when it was that bad.
People just love listening to Queen, whether at home or in a movie theater, and clearly at that time of release, that was the best way to listen to Queen songs.
Hey, I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. All right, and now to round us out, Jacob, I'm really excited for the one that you picked.
This movie I had heard a lot of talk about it starting in like early March. Remember, I was actually planning on going to see it in March, but I'd gotten a little too busy at work, and the times that they were showing the movie was like 11 in the morning. I eventually watched it in, I think it was June or so, and the movie that I am referring to is RRR, which has got to be my favorite example of maximalism used this year. It's just like the director like had a very clear vision, but he also like didn't really give a shit as to what anyone thought. He just said, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want, do it my way, and everyone can go suck the skin off a dick because this is the what I'm gonna do. And you know what he did? He did just that, and he whooped some ass, released a near impeccable movie. And the only other movie I would probably say can kind of stand up to it as far as movies that have come out this year is Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I'm going to be in the minority on the second movie, but The Northman. Those are the only two movies I think could really kind of go bat to bat with our.
Love The Northman. That's your number 2, right, of this year?
It is my number 2 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so dead on about RRR. I saw that movie in a completely empty theater after weeks of like trying to find it in the Telugu version. You're right. They scheduled that movie at the weirdest times of the day, so it was a nightmare to try and figure out when I could see it. But man, once that Natu Natu dance sequence hits, you know you're in for a treat. That movie is just 3 hours of unabashed hype. You can't avoid its charms.
I only disagree with your Natu Natu statement in that the movie basically opens with this one guy fighting against hundreds of people and somehow surviving all that, followed by a scene where the other main character fights a tiger, and all that happens within the first like 20 minutes. Whereas with the Natu Natu moment happens 1 hour into this 3-hour masterpiece.
But that speaks to how good the Natu Natu sequence is, that it just takes it to that next level.
I still think the funniest scene near the end of the movie when they're going to go after, I guess, the character that represents, I'm going to say Water? The one that, the sister, the guy who has the sister, I forget his name.
Yeah.
They're going after him at the end of the movie, and then, like, the British, like, leader, like, fucking gets, like, ejected from his car, like, in the most, like, over-the-top way imaginable, just flung out, reloaded it, shot it, and then shot the other dude's car, and then he, like, just got flung out and hits a fucking tree. That was just so amazing. I'd also like to add that the theater experience I had with it, because I watched it during like the little rerun period they had where everyone started to get really hyped about it. And there was a kid who was sitting in front of me who has obviously seen the movie because he was getting hype at all of like the big moments in the movie. And like during the Natu Natu scene, he started like screaming and hollering. And me and my friends that I was with, we were all like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? After seeing it, I can see why it checks.
Hooting and hollering at RRR.
Have y'all seen those videos of like inside the theaters in India where like
Oh yeah.
they have like pyrotechnics coming out. People
Confetti
are like
everywhere.
screaming. It's amazing.
That's incredible.
We need to make RRR the new Rocky Horror.
That would be sweet.
It's like India, it's already blowing up. It's like every other country just needs to follow suit.
I feel like this is a good segue to our second point because we need more movies, in particular, one that originates from America, to be as bold and expressive as RRR.
Mm-hmm. Before we go there, though, as we've been talking about this, I've been thinking, and I think we talked about this when we had our first little meeting, was that, this has actually been quite a good movie year. At the very least, a very good, I think, a blockbuster mainstream movie year, which might not be the best sign of the health of the movie-going experience, but at the same time, like that, we didn't even mention the Batman. There were 4 different movies that I would have loved to have talked about, like Top Gun, Northman, Everything Everywhere. Didn't talk about Ambulance, exactly. Mentioned Crimes of the Future, obviously smaller film with an X, like.
Or even The Bubble.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Get out of here.
Come on, number one.
Man. Jacob, you're fired off the podcast.
You're done. Death in the Nile, these are top 3 movies for me this year. Yeah, I think we're slowly and hopefully getting back to a more diverse release of movies. And of course, diverse can mean many things. And I think in terms of like the output, not just the one big Marvel movie every 3 to 4 months, So there we can definitely segue if you want to kick that off, JPP.
So I definitely appreciate, Mank, that you took that in a more positive direction, because it is important to note whenever we go into these conversations about the dire state of some aspects of the film industry that there is a lot of really good shit out there, and I encourage everyone who's unsatisfied with the state of the movies right now to seek out more stuff you like and spread the gospel of more stuff you like, because that's how things get repaired, is through that word of mouth and through the consumers rejecting the kind of, hollow product that we so often get. So whatever you like, say it loud. I think it's about time that we start to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe industrial complex. So this year, if I'm not mistaken, a lot happened for Marvel. Was this the first year of the Disney Plus series, or was that 2021?
2021.
So this,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
yeah, well, and that just tells you, you said they've done a lot. They've done a lot, but accomplished very little. There has been so much, and yet so little that has actually been memorable or justifies this whole operation at this point.
So we're in the second year of our TV shows. We're approaching the end of Marvel's Phase 4, and we have had 2 movies come out this year. We've had Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and we have had Thor: Love and Thunder. Before we get into it, I'd like to hear kind of everyone's history and journey with Marvel, because it is such a ubiquitous, gigantic part of the film industry now.
I know for me, like, I never really grew up a big Marvel fan. I always grew up more of a DC fan. I mean, growing up on like things like Teen Titans and Justice League on Cartoon Network as a kid. When the first Iron Man movie came out, I was like, yeah, this looks cute, whatever. Then I watched it, I was like, oh, that was pretty good. That was pretty fun. Afterwards it became kind of an event. At the time I didn't really see it very well, but looking back, I can kind of see just how huge Marvel was slowly becoming, because it went from like Iron Man, Jon Favreau made a movie that actually wasn't super bad. And then the quality seemed to kind of diminish for me at least. But I mean, everyone else was just really locked in. And so, I was like, all right, it's fine. Whatever. People like what they like. I just know that for me, I don't really have like a problem with people liking things that I don't like. I mean, in complete honesty, like we have a friend who very much loves the original Suicide Squad movie, when I think that is just a fucking load of trash. But I don't think our friend is a load of trash. I think he's an excellent person. It's more so that my criticisms that I have for it now lies a lot more with how massive this like capitalistic beast it has become, and how it's just kind of consumed everything. And I think the most recent, but I guess applicable example to my dismay towards like Marvel as a whole is, last year when Spider-Man came out, right? Like, it was a huge movie. Like, I get, you got to put it on as many screens as possible to really kind of make the most bang for your buck, because I mean, it was big. It was the biggest movie like of the holidays last year, right? But because Disney owned Marvel, and Disney was one of the only other studios that actually had movies coming out at that time, they're like, oh, well, we'll just like sideline all the other movies that we have that are out right now. So, movies like Nightmare Alley, you don't really get many screens of that, because Marvel decided, or Disney decided, oh, well, Spider-Man's bigger anyway, so fuck the movie. We're just going to try to milk the hell out of it. And you can kind of go as far to say that's kind of the same shit that's going on with like Batgirl, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, well, we don't really think it's going to do super well, so fuck it. That's kind of where I lie. I don't have an issue with people liking Marvel movies, but I really hope that people kind of see the issues that have kind of arisen from the Marvel movies in regards to how movies are released today. I will say that based on the discussion we had earlier in regards to blockbusters and things like that, I do think we are kind of moving in a better position, because we definitely had a lot of blockbusters come out this year that were actually very, very good. Like a little too good for the kind of stuff that we've had, at least in recent memory, I would say. These kinds of years where we have these kinds of blockbusters are very rare and few in between.
To counter my earlier optimistic point, I think things are still very dire, but I think hopefully, as we've talked about, they're trending in a better direction. At the same time, like, I think I've probably gone through like the 12 different stages of like Marvel acceptance and rejection, in that I just looked up when the first Iron Man came out in 2008. I felt like I was 10, but I was actually 15 when I saw that. So as a 15-year-old, seeing that type of movie for the first time was like mind-blowing. It was, I remember genuinely loving it. Not maybe quite to the level that I felt when I saw Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which came out when I was like maybe 8 or 7. I think also, like, when you've seen other types of pre-MCU movies, that really changes and kind of contextualizes how you view this more, as JPP put it, this industrial complex of films where it's beyond just, an individual artistic production output. I mean, again, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man's still about superheroes, still participating in that, but the filmmaking is just vastly different. The filmmaking of the early MCU movies was totally fine, if not quite good sometimes. The sheer just like drop off in quality and quality control, especially over the past few years, has just been, pretty much unacceptable given how much there
Uh-huh.
is. And I wonder also how much of this is going back to like, a hyper capitalist, basically, production here in terms of what Disney's operating at. But like, is this because, Disney Plus and shareholders, oh, we need X amount more content every year? I can't imagine that Kevin Feige is truly on board or okay with what he's putting out at this point. I mean, it's just bad. Not everything's bad. I think some things like Loki, I genuinely and unironically loved, and I can't wait for more of that.
Loki was fantastic. That felt like an exorcism of
Yeah,
so many demons of this
it
universe.
gave it gave me the exact thing that I've always wanted from these movies. And it's not a movie, but I mean the movies are shows, the shows are movies, whatever. Like it blurs the lines of what the form is, but like that finale was just people in a room talking. It was a total rejection and subversion of everything that you would normally get from the MCU. So my hope is just that at some point, maybe post phase 4, there will be a come to Jesus moment in terms of like what they need to do to make these movies and shows a viable product, but at the same time, like not to sound like a dick, but I kind of enjoy seeing the increasing rejection of this stuff from people, and maybe that's just the bubble I'm in on Twitter, but which I definitely think is a point too. But I think there is a more noticeable recognition of the drop off here. I'm not sure how that gets fixed, especially when you see all this stuff coming out of plans for Comic-Con. Although Wakanda Forever looks amazing, so fingers crossed there.
I feel like a big problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole is just that it does not seem to slow down at all. It seems like with each year, we're getting more and more pieces of content, which is the thing I have to say now because television is now a major thing. Like, if you were to go back to phase 1, phase 2, at most, it was 2 movies a year. And then around phase 3, it was basically upgraded to 3 movies a year. Now with phase 4, partially we can blame this on the pandemic, but even with that not considered, you have at least 3 or 4 movies in a year and another 4 or 5 TV shows in a year, all stacked almost one right after the other. I think having it stacked like that, clearly it does show that there is plans for it, and clearly they're very good at creating minimum viable products. But the problem is a lot of the same studios, like effects companies and all that, work on these movies and shows. So when you put that stress on those people, it's like there's no choice but to time crunch. And when you time crunch, all the work gets worse. I remember a couple years ago when people were trashing the climax of Black Panther for the bad CGI, and I feel like just with each passing year, it's just been getting worse and worse. Like, it's not so much that the effects themselves are getting even more incompetent. It's just that more of the movie or the show looks bad. There are exceptions to this, of course. Like, I certainly think Loki is one of the better looking shows. I even really like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of
Mm-hmm.
Madness, the
Oh
effects on
yeah.
that.
Yep.
At the same time, we have stuff like She-Hulk, and we have little moments in No Way Home or the climax of Shang-Chi. Everything is just getting worse on a technical level. Not so much like the fundamentals, but that's sort of the problem.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Sorry.
heavily flawed, but it's still sort of passable. And it being sort of passable, that's the thing that's making it bad, because it makes all the bad stuff just be accepted. And we clearly, with Marvel they're getting so much money every year, you expect them to do way better.
Yeah, I think there are fundamental issues though, because, and this goes back to the point with the VFX and that Black Panther example, because everything that we have heard recently from supposed VFX artists on Reddit, or the more kind of like robust reporting, I think it was like a Vulture Variety article, whatever, of how the directors and like actual artistic crew are not involved at certain points of the actual production, like the Black Panther third act. Apparently the cinematographer wasn't even like in the room. I could be misquoting that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. And that just, again, highlights how directors are not really hired to direct these movies. They're just kind of there to manage things, which is what a director does, yes, but there are so many pieces that are being made in isolation and on this kind of like this production line of just churning this stuff out where it's not representing a normal production process. And that's why you get all this like inconsistency, you know? And that only gets worse, Mark, to your point, when the output volume is like exponentially increasing and there's no sign of slowing down.
Yeah, and
Look,
I think it doesn't help that certainly with these last couple phases, Marvel has gone out of their way to hire filmmakers who don't have a lot of background in visual effects. So you end up basically with movies where the directors will have an involvement on the emotional scenes, all the drama stuff, but then the action is almost entirely the second unit or other action design. It's not like the director's really putting that much of a stamp on it.
Right. And you can see that though. You can see when you give somebody like Raimi experience with blockbusters and more kind of high concept filmmaking, he can visualize that stuff. So that's why I'm not surprised that we were actually able to. Well, I actually was pretty surprised when I saw that movie, and I was still skeptical when a lot of the reviews were coming out about people saying, oh, you know, this is a full-blown Raimi movie, which it not necessarily is, but it is enough. It was enough to me to keep me mildly still interested in this project, if at least it shows that, like, you can give these filmmakers a little more room to play. And when you do, it winds up being so much better than the more clinical and managed process you might get from one of those more inexperienced indie directors, you know? Then you got Taika, who is like, as we talked about before, probably not given enough control and just went a little too wild. Maybe more than a little wild.
But look, I love Marvel as a brand. I love superheroes. I love comic books. I think there's so much power in those stories. And I think for the first, 10 or so years of Marvel Studios, as they kind of grew their power and whatnot and, got the big Disney bucks, I think that they told a lot of really great stories and made a lot of really great popular entertainment that had a lot of value. I will always cherish the memory of going to go see Endgame opening night at midnight with my little brother and us both crying over Tony Stark dying. Like there is a great cultural aspect to Marvel where it's a lot of fun to discuss these movies and have that shared bond. However, we're to the point where they're just releasing so much and the quality control is out of control and they're just clogging up the movie theaters. Another big thing is they've kind of weaponized their fans at this point to characterize anyone who doesn't like the movies or is disappointed by the movies as pretentious or, just complaining to complain. And that's not at all the case. I think most of us have enjoyed quite a bit of superhero movies and we'll admit when something's good. Like I'll mention Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which quite honestly is one of my new favorite superhero movies, period. And that came out this year. It's just the fact that Marvel has such a stranglehold on basically the industry as a whole. And they're so big that things like, VFX artists complaining about the conditions they're forced to work in, that'll probably just get swept under the rug because audiences have to have more products from Marvel.
It was already swept under the rug after they had the big hit piece that had just come out.
Right.
And then a few days afterwards was the Comic-Con panel. And then everyone was like, oh, yeah, visual effects artists who?
I think it's just unfortunate that people aren't coming to these movies, or, I say movies, but it's almost all just these severely okay Disney Plus shows that are coming out. And, once again, I'm not above saying which ones I liked. I liked Loki. I liked Moon Knight. I had some fun with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, etc., etc. But look at that Comic-Con announcement and tell me it's anything other than just IP mining at this point. I mean, who is excited for some of this? And I'm not saying that to disparage you, but it's like we're not making movies about characters that are vital. We're just burning through the characters that we have in our backlogs at this point.
It also feels like we're just killing time until Marvel introduces Fantastic Four and X-Men.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that I feel like right now we're just in this holding pattern. And it's just like the question of, where is this all going? Like, what is this leading to? I don't give a shit, like And then clearly that was the big question, right? And then Comic Con happened, like, oh, we're doing Secret Wars, doing Kang Dynasty, and people are like, oh, okay, Kevin Feige has a plan. Like, fuck the plan. The real plan should be making individually sustainable, high quality. I'm not asking for Logan every time. I'm not asking for the Dark
Yeah.
Knight every time, but like Iron Man 2 in comparison now, like probably looks amazing. Maybe not amazing, but compared to some of the stuff that's coming out right now, like I
Well,
rewatched the first Thor and still not good, but like
it feels like a real
a
movie.
real felt like there was actually, a pretty point A to Z where that it was like we knew everything that was happening and it wasn't just focused on getting to the next thing. It just feels like we're on a line for a bigger ride, and like that should not be the purpose of making these movies. You can make a self-sustaining franchise for so many of these characters that doesn't have to be based on, oh, we're gonna build up to this next big thing. And yet, that's all that people want now. And that's, I think, what's upsetting about what's expected of movies now.
With the Disney Plus shows, it's like I don't really think they found a very grounded approach to pacing. And I think the only one that really kind of did decently with the pacing was Loki. I didn't really care for WandaVision. It had a cool setup. It could have gone in a very interesting direction, but it really was like, oh, well, we got to explain everything. And then so on and so forth. Loki was excellent. I thought that was a great Disney Plus show, had a very much more kind of meditative finale rather than just the visual effects like clusterfuck that they're used to. I don't know what show I stopped at. I didn't watch Moon Knight, which kind of hurts to say because Ethan Hawke's a total Chad and Oscar Isaac is my dad. And then I had some interest in watching Miss Marvel just because I do think that the main actress, Simone Villani, I think she's a very cool person, at least from what I've seen in interviews. And then also, like, one of the actors, an alumnus of my university, and they were pushing that real hard. And I thought that was super cool. So, I mean, I don't know. I just am kind of disappointed with like throwing stuff at the wall. And I understand that we're kind of in this lull of time between like Endgame and then whatever is like the big next thing, which obviously is things like Secret Wars and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like, all right, well, let's introduce all of these people and get them into the mix. To be honest with you, I don't even really know if I'm really kind of planning on watching another Marvel movie because I think now it's just going to be like, if you're not watching the shows, get fucked.
I like that you brought up Miss Marvel because I would actually like to go to bat for that. It wasn't perfect, but I think it understood what these things should be, which is, telling pretty fantastic stories about larger than life characters, which is what we want. And that's really all they have to do. All I want is for them to do that, get their quality control in order, and control their fan base. Because, Jesus, it's like the second anyone says anything, you constantly have like 50,000 at least MCU fans down your throat telling you that you hate general audiences just because you don't want it only to be superhero movies.
I mean, I think that is one of the many kind of unseen and hard to discern effects of the stranglehold that Marvel and Disney has had on the movie going experience, whatever you want to call it, just, movies in general. Because you get a lot of those folks too, like who often go to the idea of like, oh, well, the MCU movies are the only reason why you can even still go to a movie theater. They're saving theaters and keeping them alive. And I'm like, well, sure, but is that really a good thing? Should we be happy about there being one company or set of movies responsible for keeping the lights on at these places? And, we could go on a totally separate discussion about how theaters themselves are to blame for that, in terms of pricing and just not doing anything really to make going to the movies a attractive thing for like the non, cinephile type. But we have plenty of friends and people that we love who are hardcore MCU fans, and it's not about those folks. It's not that MCU fan equals bad person. It's just that the situation and the dynamic of them being the only game in town a lot of the time has created the situation where that's the only point of reference a lot of these hardcore fans have. They've grown up with such a limited availability of big budget mainstream movies, so it really becomes so much of their identity. And that's really kind of where it gets a bit scary and, upsetting in terms of the way that a lot of these folks kind of engage with you online.
It doesn't help that we're now in an age where a lot of people view streaming as the primary method of watching anything, movies, shows, what have you. So for a lot of those people, including some of the most diehard Marvel fans, it's like if it's not a Marvel movie, it's not worth seeing in the theater. It's very much like, oh, I'll wait until it comes out on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. Like, I'm not even sure if this is all Marvel's fault. I think it's just the industry as a whole, where the legitimacy of the different platforms, they've been changing these last couple of years and fast. And audiences are just reacting just to seeing, like, because with audience, it's always about what's the easiest way for me to get this content in my eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, it's streaming. And now at this point, it's like, if you're not a Marvel movie, I don't care to see you in the theater. I'm just going to go watch it on home.
Yeah, that's a great
So
point. It is not just, it's like not Disney is responsible for all of this stuff, right? I think Disney came, the MCU came at the exact perfect time and capitalized and took advantage of a rapidly shifting industry and market and consumer behavior with the way that people were becoming more accustomed to staying at home for more original serialized content. And then as people were staying home more, not going to theaters as much, Disney started getting more power at the MCU, gaining a bigger traction on new IP like Star Wars. They filled a need, right? They filled a need that was becoming increasingly less available at movies as streaming was taking over. But because of that, there's been a disproportionate amount of this quote unquote content now out there because of the way that things have changed. So yeah, it's not just Disney. You can't argue with the fact that what they have done is brilliant. I hate it, but it's brilliant. It is a perfect example of just running the entire market and industry in a way that has become almost impossible to change.
Thing I think about a lot is how younger moviegoers will kind of be impressed upon with these movies, and it's like people who only grew up with Marvel movies and have kind of adopted the mentalities that you guys have mentioned, who's going to be showing them the movies that like made movies what they are today? Like, are they going to ever kind of dive into movies from like the 90s, from like the big indie explosion that kind of occurred then with like Quentin Tarantino became huge, Jim Jarmusch? Are they going to be able to explore these things and not feel like, oh, well, it's not Marvel, I don't give a shit? Obviously that also comes down to like if the parents are also big movie heads, because I mean, I can speak for myself, but my dad is a huge movie head. So, I mean, if it wasn't for him, I don't even think I would be in this position kind of examining like what movies people nowadays, like younger people nowadays, are going to be watching, But, hopefully I think if people start to kind of realize the tears and the seams in regards to the quality of the product being put out, I think we might be able to go into a more positive direction. But obviously right now where it's like there are tons of people who are just so diehard about these characters and these products for the most part that are kind of half-baked at most. It's kind of alarming in that way,
It's
even
so...
the negative reception on Thor Love and Thunder, it was mostly just within the film Twitter circles. I feel like with general audiences, it's another example of it being severely okay. And clearly, it's a pass. It gets you a fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Nice. But what does that mean in the future? How do you know that like you can do better than just severely okay?
Jacob, you said that thing about what will moviegoers in the future look to? What will their films be? And you brought up Tarantino and Jim Jarmusch. It's so strange to me, the cultural shift that's happened, that like 5 or so years ago, like you say those names, those would have been like your given. Some of the big directors that's your entry level. Now there's so much content and IP reigns all that you bring up those names and to some circles you sound like a pretentious asshole. It's really sad that there could be a time in like 10 to 15 years or so where something like Jaws is seen as obscure to bring up.
Yeah, I hope we don't get there, but
Yeah.
that is a sobering thought. I think that the people who want to find this stuff, they will go after it, but I think there is like a clear trend towards just not that much of an interest, because it's just not out there as much. I mean, I think about growing up on cable, right? And like discovering so many movies because I stumbled upon something 20 minutes in, 40 minutes in, and like, oh, this is interesting. Let me keep watching. And then waiting to find it again on cable and like just learning, like rewatching movies like that. And obviously having like a blockbuster is, entirely experience in a world that is totally foreign to everyone now. But the discovery aspect, like when we have so much at our fingertips, it becomes harder to choose something, discern what's good. The middle has completely eroded. I mean, what does good even mean anymore? Like, I think the fact
Yeah.
that we don't even have, I recommended that movie The Contractor to you guys, right? And like that is a very predictable, standard, by the numbers action military thriller that was a dime a dozen 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now we don't have that as much anymore with quote unquote like leading men like Chris Pine, although Chris Pine has probably the weirdest career of anyone that attractive and like good as acting as he is. But something like that totally stands out to me now because we just don't have that original middle ground. Maybe okay, maybe B movie, you know? And that's what's I think a bit increasingly more upsetting is that everything is judged in terms of like best thing ever or worst thing ever, and that's just where that hyperbole comes in from a lot of the hardcore fandoms too.
I'm curious to see what movies will mean to people in the future, because the trend that's skewing right now, it seems to be becoming more of a niche activity to be into movies that aren't these big IP blockbusters. Because, Mank, like you said, now we have so much stuff at our fingertips that I feel like brands are kind of what audience chases now. So
Mhm.
these films are kind of just another medium, an established brand coming through, which is depressing. But I guess I'm just curious to see what'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, we used to watch we meaning like people before kind of like the major state of the blockbuster, but like you used to watch a movie for an actor. If you saw, oh, Denzel's in that, I'm gonna watch that. Tom Hanks, whatever. Like that is just not how it works now. To your point about brands, it's that, and this is not an original idea. Like, franchises and IP and notable characters like superheroes have taken over and replaced the movie star to a degree where it's like you can have people who still sell and open a movie, but that's becoming increasingly more rare, and it's about, okay, what does this thing, this is not a new idea, but it's like, does this thing have a brand that I know and understand? And the stuff that cuts through, like Nopes and Everything Everywhere All at Once, is like, those are so much more, feel so much more special because of how limited they are. But what is that, the chance of that happening in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Are movie theaters, do they continue to maybe scale down? Like, I really think what we need more of is a Alamo Draft House type place where it's like, okay, you're gonna come here and you're gonna have a night out. You're gonna go have a beer. You're gonna, eat whatever. I know you guys talked about not liking some things about Alamo, but like that's the general idea of what I think it needs more of.
Yeah, with Alamo, let's get onto a fun little tangent here. With Alamo, it's a great place. I enjoy going there. However, god damn, the second you make noise or do something to upset the staff, you are in for a treat from that staff.
And the funniest thing about that is that I feel like the workers make more noise overall than even the audience member because they have to, ask, go through the different aisles and talk to people, or just the fact even moving around, it's going to cause noise. And it's almost worse than just like talking. If you say a thing, it doesn't automatically mean like, oh, you're disengaged with the film. Like, because the whole point of like having a reaction
Yeah.
is like it's honest. Like, if you want to say like, oh my god, what the fuck was that? Like that's what the movie wanted you to think. It's like the movie like has you under its spell. But I feel like for some of the workers there, it's like there's no difference, and that's
Yeah.
where the
Yeah,
problem comes.
I guess it depends on which draft house I go to, and again, I won't disparage draft house because wonderful establishment. I love to go there. However, man, some of those workers, I feel like they're taking a little too much power into their own hands, and I love the idea of luxury theaters, coming back and stuff like that. I just hope that they can be welcoming to people who want to get into cinema, because Draft House is great. However, it can be kind of off-putting
Mhm.
to some folks who are trying to get into it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Very, very exclusive. So more spaces like Draft House, absolutely. Just welcoming and encouraging to fostering getting into cinema for people, I'd say.
Point being, not a draft house clone, but the idea being, to your point, luxury. And maybe, it doesn't even have to be luxury. It could just be some place where people are excited to go to. Even, something like Cinemark chains, those, I've been starting to go to those more. It's not a luxury experience, but like there's a clear kind of like quality to the theaters. It looks like you're actually paying for something, that warrants the price and those types of things, right? But I think like the more that you can make theater going something that people are excited to go to and not feel like they're maybe wasting their money on, given how expensive it is, I think the better chance you'll have at the experience maintaining itself over the next, several, years, decades, whatever.
At this point, I think any theater is good, whether it's like a high chain theater, like an Alamo, or even like a Cinemark. A couple years ago, when the pandemic was really a big thing, I was scared that theaters would completely go away. I honestly thought it was done, but certainly at the end of 2020 and start of 2021, like certainly things were looking better. Nowadays, for most people, movie theaters are sort of like arcades in that you can still go. It's not something that everyone's going to do because some people are just more comfortable doing those activities at home. But as long as avenues exist and as long as people are trying to make them exist, the state of theaters are going to be okay.
I have to ask, do y'all think the state of popular cinema can be salvaged?
Yes. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep going with the optimism here, even though I'm a very cynical person. We are returning to, I think, a version of like movie going and, the theater experience that might look something a bit closer to what it was maybe, 40, 50 years ago. Of course, back then, the idea of like IP and big franchises was not nearly even a fraction of what it is today. Like you think about all of, we were talking before about that kind of like middle B movie, maybe even like the more like bad quote unquote movies being erased from the theaters, and it's only like the really big blockbuster stuff or like awards buzzy, type of movie. But things like, I don't know, it just came in my head that what is that Vin Diesel witch hunter movie? The Last Witch Hunter, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Okay, a movie like that, which I think I might have even like thought was fine, but think of all those kinds of movies that are just not being released anymore, and like, do we miss those? I personally don't. I think there is a point now where it's like, okay, we are scaling back a bit on the total volume of what's going to be in a theater, but and this is not even just talking about what's in theaters, right? Because we can talk about streaming and all that, but and quality of movies that are on there too. But I do think that at the end of the day, everything is cyclical, and the MCU will not be what it is now 10 years from now. It may still be a massive cultural force, but people's tastes change, behaviors change, what people want changes. I think we're seeing that very clearly. Take this back to the beginning about how relatively strong it has been of a movie year so far. And a lot of this depends on, of course, like the business and profitability of these theaters and who can hold on. But I do think this stuff can be salvaged. And I think we're hopefully heading in a place where the pendulum is swinging backwards.
As long as people see shit they like and tell their friends to go see it and just keep talking about movies, I think everything will be all right. And that the medium will weather whatever, MCU sized tyrant that is hanging over us right now.
Just want more people to see more foreign films. There's a bunch of really good shit out there.
Well, that's a good point, though, too, I think, is that the future of film and movies and just that whole experience, like, it's not going to be purely the American experience. And I think that's where the future of it is. And that's where the optimism for me, and I think to your point, comes from, is that, going back to the Bond quote, it's like, don't let the little subtitles be a barrier. And the more that you can be exposed to that, and it's hard for people to see a lot of these movies, but we are, I think, becoming a far, far more international and global society in general. But in terms of what's coming out at the movies, it's not necessarily the worst thing if the American reign of film is over.
I mean, hell, Mank and I, we watched Redbeard over at Film Forum. That movie fucking ruled.
And it was packed too. Absolutely packed.
You guys want to talk about what we're looking forward to for the rest of the year?
Avatar: The Way of Water.
You stole mine.
It's the biggest one.
I'm looking forward to I'll just say Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
I was gonna say Way of Water, but instead of that, I'm gonna say Babylon because I love me some Damien Chazelle, and everything that we have heard so far sounds like it's gonna absolutely kill. I mean, cast is insane. Brad Pitt, Tobey Maguire, Margot Robbie, Samara Weaving. I mean, need I say more?
You dirty dog. That's what I was going to say. I am equally skeptical, but also excited about whatever "Don't Worry, Darling" is going to turn into. I'm very hopeful that movie comes out pretty well. Everything looks good. I mean, I liked Booksmart. I think Olivia Wilde has a good eye for directing. You know, I'm very curious to see if heavy shift in cinematic tone pans out for her, which I'm pretty optimistic that it will.
If you like juicy behind the scenes
I was just gonna say,
there's a lot of really fun stuff about kind of what's been going on behind the scenes, but Don't Worry, Darling, that I will send you after this, Jacob. You'd have a lot of fun.
I think you were onto this though originally because didn't you mention like your girlfriend saying something about how Florence Pugh like didn't post anything about the first trailer?
Yeah, and obviously I took all of that discussion with a grain of salt because there's obviously no real confirmation on that, I believe, in regards to like the validity of whether there was actually some kind of tension on set or not, because I mean I wasn't there.
Yeah, well there's like more, and I'm sure the thing that JPP is talking about, there's like a TikTok from somebody who personally like apparently worked on the movie, it was a PA, and like that's why there's like a lot of like memeing going on Twitter about how Florence Pugh actually directed the movie, and if it's good, it's because of her. So we'll see.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
Honestly, like Don't Worry, Darling was high on my anticipated list, but I feel like all this drama, like true or not, has just kind of made me sort of sick of it. I'll still see it when it comes out, and like because Olivia Wilde is a great director, the cast looks excellent. It's just this is one of those times where it's like I just want to log off.
See, me, I love mess. So I will go see that movie with a smile on my face, being like, "Oh, is this one of the scenes that Blank directed, or is it one of the scenes that Blank allegedly directed?" But it does look like a really excellent movie. With Avatar: The Way of Water, I have nothing else to say other than James Cameron is a master, and I will always support what he releases.
Don't bet against Cameron ever. The teaser, every time it plays, I literally freak out because I think it looks like amazing.
Such a leap forward in tech. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Clear that the decade of waiting was clearly, it was all about just making sure everything was perfect. And Alita was definitely a step forward in that regard. Obviously, Cameron didn't direct it, but he certainly had his fingers on that, and nothing else I can say against it. At least from a visual standpoint, it's probably the best looking blockbuster of the year.
I mean, I hope it does well because I need Avatar 2 through 10, and who knows if Disney will fund it. So it's gotta be good. People gotta go out and see it. I did want to make a few honorable mentions because I was just looking at the 2022 list for the rest of the year, thinking, oh, there's really not that much else I'm kind of excited about, but a few things. George Miller's new movie, 3,000 Years of Longing.
Oh, that's soon.
It's supposed to
right?
be, it says...
Next month.
Next month.
Yeah. A batshit crazy trailer from a batshit crazy director and artist, and currently reading the Making of Fury Road book, and just so much respect for this man. I hope we get around to seeing his Furiosa movie too. And then a few others. Clerks 3.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Clerks 3.
Yeah. Kevin
Fablemans.
Yeah.
The Whale.
The Whale. Yep. If you like Martin McDonagh, Blonde, yeah. If you like Martin McDonagh, his new movie.
The Woman King.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
One movie I'm actually pretty damn excited for is that Universal movie with Billy Eichner called Bros.
Oh, yeah.
That looks
good.
really
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
I can see that being kind of a surprise hit.
Oh, and Tar, the one from Todd Field.
Oh, yeah. He hasn't done a movie in a minute, right?
Old Todd Field or Nick Nightingale.
One big honorable mention that nobody's talked about yet. Halloween Ends. I love David Gordon Green. I think Halloween Kills was very bold, no matter whether you felt positively or negatively about it. It did some really new things with the concepts. So I'm excited to see him bring it home. hopefully, and see how this trilogy will sit before his Exorcist trilogy starts filming.
I didn't love Halloween Kills. I appreciated what it tried doing. I don't think it had maybe as subtle of a hand as it needed to. But then again, Halloween, it really hasn't been subtle since the first Halloween. So I am excited to see how it closes out. If not, at least give me an idea of how his Exorcist trilogy will be, which is kind of scary to think about now. We'll see.
So I think that's a good note to go out on. Halloween ends, as does the podcast. Does
Nice.
anyone have anything they want to plug? Any writing? Any socials?
No, not right now. I think, we post this on the Twitter. All of our handles are there if y'all want to follow us. I think Jacob,
Follow us on MySpace.
yeah, MySpace, Foursquare.
Add me on Kick.
Add me on AOL.
All right, and this has been the first episode of CineSkeptics. Great conversations were had, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.